So you probably noticed I don't really do a lot of pad reviews on the channel anymore, mostly because it's a really oversaturated market. It's filled with some pretty interesting personalities, and arguing with strangers about stuff like static friction isn't my idea of a good time. Because of those factors, I find it can be a pretty confusing space for someone new to get into and find something that works for them. I like Lethal Gaming Gear for a number of reasons. I've worked with them for years, their customer service is great, their owner Dylan is just like a top tier person, and I really like the way that they rank all their pads by speed. They range from super slow control pads, mostly suited to tac shooters like CS and Val, through medium and fast pads more geared for arena or arcade shooters. So we're going to check out their Pro line today, along with their recent collaboration with Pulsar, the Hyperion. This video is not really intended for hardcore mousepad enthusiasts. The idea here is to be really accessible, so I'm not going to talk over anybody's head, and I'm not going to make a huge deal out of small details. What I am going to do is be very transparent about how I play on all these pads in different situations, both the good and the embarrassingly bad. Full disclosure, Lethal did pay for this production slot today. As always, my opinions are my own, and they don't get to see a sneak preview of the video or anything before you do. You can check out the little blurb in my description if you want to know more about how that works on my channel. Firstly, all these Pro pads come flat packed, except for the XXL 1000mm desk mat size, so you don't have to worry about any waves or edges that won't lay down. The backs or the base on these are all made from a material called Slim Flex, formerly known as Poron. Same stuff, new name. All of these come in soft and extra soft variants. The core line also comes in firm, but Hyperion hasn't launched in firm as of this video. The firm base has an extra layer of PU laminate on the bottom, so it helps it be more sticky on the desk. The soft and extra soft variants are actually a custom SKU of Slim Flex made exclusively for Lethal Gaming Gear. The stitching on the Pro series is really well done too, some of the best I've seen. It's tighter and made to be more durable than the original models. I normally play COD with a sens of just under 25 centimeters, so I do have to make some big swipes from time to time, and while the surface texture may bother my arms sometimes, like on the Saturn Pro, the stitching never does. For sizing, we have XL at 490 by 420 millimeters, a 500 by 500 square, and the 1000mm by 500mm desk mat size. I normally use the XL because it just seems to fit better with everything on my desk. For colors, the core line comes mainly in black. Saturn Pro offers a red option, and the Hyperion also adds this nice midnight slate color that unfortunately I don't have here, but I really like. For reference, I generally just run stock skates. I normally main the Viper V3 Pro, which has really large glides front and back, and I don't really enjoy glass skates a lot, and I've never experimented with dots. I don't sweat a lot by nature, and I don't wear a gaming sleeve. So I don't get super DJing with it these days because I've been doing this for almost a decade, and I found that training with consistent gear has offered me more improvement over time than chasing new and different gear all the time. We're going to start with the Saturn Pro today because this pad is the longest running main of mine over the past few years, and I know it really well. I ran this for nearly 2 years, I think, only switching off a few months back so I could alternate between the Riz Doodles pad from Leonda and the Aqua Control Neon from X-Ray pad just because I needed some variety, and they both play a lot different. This is the actual pad I've used for years with a different logo, different base pattern versus the diamond pattern on the new versions. It's a soft, and I've been really impressed with how it's held up. There's been loads of QC improvements since this version too. This surface is a textured cloth. It's kind of rough with no apparent coating of any kind, and it feels smoother horizontally than vertically to me. Because of how and what I play, which is primarily COD, I judge pads in these 3 areas in this order. Initial flick to target and how consistent or predictable that movement is for me. That's affected by how consistent the surface is and stopping power, or how quickly you can stop your movement accurately. Second is tracking smoothness, which should be pretty obvious, and then a distant third, the ease and accuracy of micro corrections, when you get almost to your target on initial flick, but you may need to correct by a few pixels. If you primarily play tac shooters, that last one is going to be way more important than tracking smoothness. On the scale of slow to fast, Saturn is the second slowest pad on this list, so you'd think this was a really slow control pad, but for me this has always felt like more of a medium speed option for a cloth pad. In COD, the main mechanics are target switching and tracking, unless you're exclusively sniping, and this pad has served me really well here. Initial flick is usually pretty predictable for me. Tracking is solid, especially on close to medium encounters. Any lag you see when a target switches direction is not the pad's fault. It's just that I'm dad mode now and my reaction time is not what it was 20 years ago. In Black Ops 6, if you miss your first sniper shot, you're generally dead on reload, so there's not much room for micro corrections, but tracking a small distance target, particularly if they're in head glitch cover, is really 50-50 for me. If there's a downside to this pad, it's that, at least on the soft version, it is affected by humidity. We live in Massachusetts now and the humidity is all over the place. Alright, so admittedly, I'm pretty dog shit at Kovacs. I really only use it when I'm auditing a product because it removes all the variables that come with actual gameplay, so I can just see pure aim and sensor behavior. Versus playing in-game, the vertical range in Kovacs from top to bottom is a lot taller and the target spawns are totally random, whereas in-game you generally have a pretty good idea of where people are going to be coming from, so you anticipate that with cursor position. I'll put the scenarios I use to audit each factor down in the description so you can experiment yourself if you never have. Just don't forget to enter your specific game setting values in the menu if you've never done this. This was my first time using the firm version of this pad and I'd like it a lot more than soft. It's not as sticky on the desk. I've got a secret lab desk and it's got that fake leather leather top. It does fine, like it doesn't slide around, but the softer options are stickier. Using firm feels like I'm reducing variables. It's just the surface and my mouse, and that's it. And everything, including tracking, feels a lot more consistent. That's a word you're gonna hear a lot today. Softer versions introduce some minimal element of vertical pressure down into the pad, and that can affect speed. As a general rule, the softer you go, the slower it is, and the more control you have over stopping power. Now, keep in mind that depending on how heavy-handed you are, this can be really subtle, so it's best to think of the speed of the surface as the major difference, and then the softness of the base as a minor refinement. So in general, on the Saturn Pro, I tend to play slightly more consistently on the firm, but the softer versions are more comfortable on my arm, especially over long sessions. Now we're gonna step down in speed to the Jupiter Pro, their slowest pad. This is listed as a very slow speed, extreme control surface, or what you normally hear people refer to as a mud pad. Surface here is smooth, it's got a little sheen to it, and it seems to be the same friction vertically and horizontally. Coming right from the Saturn and just running the mouse over the top of the pad, it feels immediately and obviously slower. What surprised me though was that in game it made me a lot more accurate with only a minimal difference in speed. My aim doesn't look or feel as shaky either with this pad. For initial flick speed, it felt pretty slow in Kovacs. In tracking drills, I was more consistent with slower moving targets and less consistent at first with faster moving targets. In game though, immediate improvement. The stopping power is real, just a dead stop with no jitter or float to either side, and no wild overcompensating if my target had good movement skills either. All in all, the whole experience felt much more controlled, and the only time the speed was really a factor for me is when somebody gets really close or they slide past me and I have to flick fast to reacquire them, but I feel like I can adapt to that in time or with a little bump to sensitivity, no problem. This makes me feel like an idiot for shunning control pads for as long as I have. I haven't been on a mud pad since like the Divina GSR. I've stayed away from them because they're widely touted as being better for tack shooters, and people have a tendency to say mud pad with a little hint of disdain in their voice, but skill issue or not, it clearly is a benefit for me. No real play difference here for me between the firm and the soft base, and again, the soft are more comfortable and they stick better. I don't normally push down into my pad a lot. It's not part of my play style, but if it is for you, just adjust accordingly. The Venus Pro used to sit right above the Saturn as a slightly faster option. It's not available right now. It may be back again in the near future, but now that space is occupied by the Pulsar collab, the Hyperion. This pad differs from the core line in that the surface and the base are both manufactured in Japan, and then they're assembled in Taiwan, where on the core line, only the base is made in Japan. This is textured, but it feels like tiny dots versus a weave, and there's a little sheen to it in the right light. And I've actually been using this on and off for the past few weeks because I got a pretty early copy, and this is a really interesting comparison to the Saturn Pro for me. Because yeah, it is faster, but after I got used to it, I also felt like it offered me more control than the Saturn Pro. This is a really fun pad for me when I want to play just balls out rush, frantic movements, goofy routes, real sloppy, but aggressive enough to still hit the top of the leaderboards. If I'm super dialed in, I can still do work on long distance maps and hit targets at a distance, provided they're pretty stationary, like a sniper. Tracking small moving targets at a distance is still challenging for me here, but I win far more of those gunfights here than I do on the Saturn Pro. Moving your cursor or your reticle to a target is one thing, but tracking a target while you're also moving is something different. If I'm gonna overcorrect, it's gonna be in that moment, and I'm better here than I am on the Saturn Pro, but I'm far more consistent with the Jupiter Pro than I am with either of these two. Sniping, quickscoping is super fun on this pad, so to me, this plays marginally better than the Saturn Pro. I will rank all these according to my performance at the end of the video, so it doesn't get too confusing as we go. And that brings us to the Neptune Pro. This is rated as fast speed, and the color on this one is a dark gray. The surface here is like a micro texture, it feels kind of plasticky, and this is crazy low friction. It's got kind of a weird pattern to it where it looks like a rolling camera shutter almost. It's been ages since I've used a cloth surface that was rated for high speed. There was a time when all I used were hard plastic pads, or like the most hated glorious ice pad or the Shininkai, but over the years I figured out those pads don't really work as well for me as a slower pad does. My only experience with a really fast pad as of late has been the Wallhack SP004. It's a glass pad, and for how I play, it is way too wild and unstable for me, especially if I've had a lot of caffeine or stims before I sit down to play. This pad is not nearly as fast as the Wallhack, but I'm not steady enough for this pad. This shows up almost immediately because even flicking to the pretty huge targets in one wall 6 target TE requires way too much correction. Tracking smoothness is okay. It's good because there's very little friction, but it's bad in that I find it hard to control the speed of the movement. This shows up in game almost exactly the same way. Sniping is a no-go. My initial flick is seldom where it needs to be. It's bad when I'm trying to track a small target at medium to long distance, or when I round a corner and there's a bunch of enemies standing there. I'm not a cool under pressure type of player. When I come around the corner and the entire enemy team is standing there, my adrenaline goes through the roof. And while I can see the play in my head 90% of the time, I'm not gonna clutch it. And that holds true to a lesser extent on the Saturn Pro and the Hyperion as well. I find it way easier to target switch in these scenarios with the Jupiter Pro, and that really helps stack kills for kill streaks. With a pad like this, most of my matches tend to be a cycle of get 1 or 2 kills, die, rinse and repeat. If you have really steady hands, play at a really high sends, or you're just a demon with fingertip grip, this pad would probably serve you really well, not only for arena shooters, but also for tack shooters. I did find that the faster the surface, the more important the bass becomes. I play noticeably better on the softer, extra soft version of this pad because I find myself subconsciously pushing the heel of my hand down into the pad like an anchor and temporarily switching from arm to wrist aiming. This action just isn't as consistent on the firm bass. So hopefully there's enough specific, relatable info there to help you understand what might be a good place to start in this lineup. Apologies that I don't have a lot of external comparisons to the LGG lineup. Like I said, I just don't review a lot of pads anymore. For me personally, here's how it stacks up. It's the Jupiter Pro by a landslide. I'd go firm. I play above average with the Saturn Pro and the Hyperion, but Jupiter makes me a lot more consistent in the areas where I'm not normally. A great example of this is headshots when you're grinding camos in Black Ops 6. I find it way easier to consciously correct after landing a couple body shots to finish with a headshot. No diddy. I have a way easier time hitting absolute beams on distance targets, and getting those team wipes or cleanups is a lot easier, which combined with some nasty kill streaks makes for some insane lobbies. It's staying on the desk. In second place is the Hyperion. Dylan, I hope you don't hate me for saying this, but it just feels like a better Saturn Pro. Not majorly better, but I do play marginally better with it. Enough that I used to generally recommend the Saturn Pro for people that didn't really know where to start, and now I would probably recommend the Hyperion, at least for arena shooters. I don't play tac shooters. If you do, and you've used both of these pads, I would love to hear your take down in the comments. So Saturn Pro firm in third, and then the Neptune Pro in one of the softer bases. I know there's some demons out there that can do some nasty work with that pad, but I am not that guy. My audio people, I have not forsaken you. I was in the middle of a big wireless headset roundup vid when one of my main Sony cameras died in my hands. It's still gonna be out for like another week or so for repairs. After that, I'll have 2 big beefy audio roundup videos coming your way, and then maybe a part 2 for Hall Effect. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you all in the next one. Stay up.